A while back, Franchesca Ramsey actually met with Andy Worski, and for a while it seemed like she was actually down to have a peaceful discussion. Then she went on a podcast and mocked him, as well as the rest of the skeptic / anti-SJW / whatever you want to call it, community. Why she did this is unknown, but since she stabbed Andy in the back after she made it out like she wanted to have a friendly discussion, I don't see any reason not to make a compilation of some of her worst, dumbest, and most racist moments on Decoded. Let's get this started.
Here's a few things white people take for granted.
Like flesh-colored band-aids that actually resemble flesh.
Okay, so first off, black band-aids exist. Second off, even if they didn't, this would be an extremely petty gripe. Third off, they're not designed to resemble the color of white people. The point is so you can see the blood seeping through so you know when you need to change it.
This is the darkest I could find.
Then you obviously didn't look very hard. And you must realize this because you wear makeup on your show, as evidenced by this tweet where you mention your makeup artist. Now granted, this tweet was made after this episode, so maybe they weren't working for you at the time, but in any case, you're dead wrong about the makeup.
White people can change their hair, and surprisingly, no one feels the need to touch it.
Well, that probably isn't helped by the fact that you want it to be socially unacceptable for white people to have traditionally black hairstyles.
And white people get to be on money, as if we don't see their faces everywhere else.
It's almost like the majority of America is white. Imagine if I went to Africa or Japan and started getting butthurt that there weren't enough white people being featured.
I've been bullied, beaten up, and called all sorts of names in my lifetime, and you're gonna tell me that's not racism? Whoa, that sounds awful. I'm sorry, none of that stuff is okay. But those are examples of racial prejudice, not racism. That's because racism isn't just about individuals, it's about institutional power.
Claiming that you can't experience racism if you're white is racist. And I'm going to debunk her reasoning that it requires institutional power with the help of another episode.
There's no denying that the election of President Barack Obama was a huge sign of progress, but it didn't stop anyone from making racist jokes and memes about the first family.
So according to Franchesca, making a meme can be racist. So going by her definition, a meme has to carry some form of institutional backing to it to be racist. But what institution is backing these racist jokes or memes?
Institutions are things like schools, government, the military, corporations, and our justice system.
Okay then, Franchesca, would you care to point out which of those institutions backs up racist memes? I don't recall being taught about how wonderful and clever racist memes were in school. As far as I'm aware, the government wasn't involved in the creation or distribution of any of these memes. The military isn't being used to force anyone to celebrate the memes. And I haven't heard of any instance of a meme being used to incriminate anyone in a court case.
Hey, my family never owned slaves. Never. We were allergic. Okay, time for an analogy. If your dad's Tony Soprano...
The analogy already doesn't work. The hypothetical person you're responding to said their family never owned slaves. So you can't use being part of a crime family as an equivalent to being a slave-owning family if the family in question never owned slaves.
Then the house you live in, the car you drive, and your iPhone was paid for with mob violence. You're not responsible for it, but you're definitely benefiting.
Oh really? Guess my parents forgot to buy me an iPhone with the money they got from owning the slaves they never owned.
You or your family didn't have to have owned slaves in order to benefit from slavery. Denying the rights of black people resulted in increased wealth, opportunities, and advancement for all white people, even if they didn't directly participate in slavery themselves.
If every single white person has increased wealth, then how can broke white people exist? You're not explaining how any of this works. In your analogy, the person in question is the direct offspring of someone who committed mob violence. But your argument is that slavery somehow benefited not only their descendants, despite the probability of the wealth being redistributed through a variety of factors, but that it also benefited every single white person. Not even just the majority, but all. You're married to a white man, so are you benefiting from this increased wealth from sharing his possessions? If you're claiming it led to an advanced society in terms of scientific and economic advancements, then pretty much everyone in America would benefit from that, not just white people. Although your statement is so vague, I don't even know if that's what you're saying.
Black Lives Matter isn't just about the loss of life, which is always terrible. It's about the lack of consequences when black lives are taken at the hands of the police. When a civilian has committed a violent crime, they're generally arrested, tried, and then convicted. Conversely, there's a lot of evidence that it's very rare to secure an indictment against a police officer for excessive force. And an indictment is just a trial. It's not even a conviction.
Okay, so first of all, do you have any evidence that this somehow isn't an issue for white people? I've seen people point to cases where an officer killed a black guy and wasn't indicted, but the part where they are indicted when they kill white people is never brought up. It's pretty much just assumed. Also worth knowing is that if there isn't enough evidence to convict an officer for excessive force, not indicting them can actually be a good thing. But that's a video for another day.
Also, black on black crime isn't a thing. 84% of white murder victims were killed by another white person, but we don't call it white on white crime.
That's because no one cries foul whenever a white person is killed by a cop. The most notable case was Justine Damon, but other than that, no one really says anything when white people are killed by police. Now, I personally don't think the black on black crime argument is a good one, but this isn't a good counter argument.
There are more white people killed by police officers than black people, but when you look proportionately within the populations, black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be shot and killed by police officers.
Yes, but you could also argue that because a disproportionate amount of crime is committed by black people, that this results in more interactions with the police, and thus leads to more fatal encounters.
Black men make up just 6% of the nation's population, but of all the unarmed people shot and killed by police in 2015, 40% of them were black men.
Fair observation, but being unarmed doesn't automatically make the shooting unjustified. If the person who was shot was trying to grab an officer's weapon, charging at them, or doing something that could render the officer unconscious, the officer's life could still be put in peril and require them to use lethal force. The officer also might not be able to tell for certain that the person in question is unarmed if they're reaching for their waistband or something like that. Now, this may very well not be the case in all or even the majority of circumstances involving shootings of unarmed people, but it's still something that needs to be taken into consideration. Because if the unarmed people in question are doing these things, then that would explain why they're being shot without racism needing to be a factor. I wanted to do more, but that's all I can really handle. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.